Ball Bracket Podcast brought to you by Delphi Bracketology. We're from Delphi High School in Delphi, Indiana, and we are in our 11th year of bracketology work. This is our first episode of 2025. I am your host, the coach, Brian Tonsoni. Would like to give a special thanks to our Delphi administration for their support for our club, letting us have a class, letting us go down to ISC Sports and do an internet television show. And thanks to Bob Thompson for our intro music, and to Jared Morris, my partner at the Back Home Network, for all of his guidance over the years in starting up this podcast. We now have over 25 students in our class and part of our club. We have a media division that is making all kinds of videos and images to use on social media and our webpage, and our webpage is delphibracketology.com. So welcome in this evening, and joining me this evening is a new member, a member from afar of Delphi Bracketology. It's Grant Shouse, and Grant is a local sports journalist here in Indiana. He's a 2023 graduate of Oak Hill High School in Converse, Indiana. He grew up the son of a basketball coach, so the love of the game has been instilled in him from a young age. You want to talk basketball with this guy. He works currently as a radio broadcaster for high school sports in central Indiana. He owns and operates his own website and podcast covering high school basketball and college basketball. Has some really great interviews with coaches that he's done, and I'm sure he has some planning up. He was a high school basketball manager at Oak Hill for 3 seasons. The team went 42-28 in those seasons, and he had a big role in that. And that's where we met, because Western High School, where I was an assistant coach, played against him. I'm not sure. Did we ever beat you? I don't think so. I think you might be undefeated against me, but welcome.
I think you guys got us one time. I think when I was a freshman, you guys got us. Yeah. And that one stung because we always wanted to beat Western.
Has a good rivalry, and Oak Hill has been really good for a long time. So Grant came up and introduced himself. He's a big fan of Indiana University and what we do with the Assembly Call, and he introduced himself to me after a game, and we've been talking hoops ever since. And when he started his own business up and in the sports journalism, I said, hey, we need to get you involved with Delphi Bracketology, and he was gracious enough to join us this year. He does some work on the webpage for games watched and other things that he'll be doing when he's not busy, but he's covering women's games, men's games all throughout the state with his golden voice. So Grant, again, it's good to have you. And I want to start out the show tonight and just talking about your general thoughts on who the best teams are that you've watched and you've seen so far this year in college basketball.
I mean, I think the first team that stands out, it's got to be Auburn, right? I mean, they have probably the consensus best player in the country, Janai Broome, other good pieces. They're obviously they're well coached. They've been to the Final Four before, but I think this is I really think this is their year to, lose it. I mean, it's tough. And I've told you this before. It's tough to really predict a national champion before you see a bracket. But on paper, I think Auburn has to stand out kind of above a lot of teams. I really like Tennessee. I know they had that 30-point loss on the road to to Florida the other night. They have some dudes as well, and it surprises me because you think back to kind of the preseason, those charity exhibitions. It's hard to believe the Indiana Hoosiers went on the road in a charity exhibition and beat Tennessee, who's held the number 1 spot for the last few weeks. But Tennessee, Auburn, looking at our seed list right here, another team I really like, Illinois, who has jumped from the 3 line in our seeding to the 2 line just overnight, is also a team that really stands out to me in the Big Ten. But like I said, it's hard to pick a national champion right now, but I would say those are probably 3 of the best teams I've seen so far.
I like what you said there about hard to predict, because it's all about matchups and it's all about who's hot and who's not, and injuries and so forth. You can have a really good seed and run up against a team that just gives you a lot of difficulty. But Auburn is clearly the most dominant team. I agree with you on there. Cooper Flagg's having a good season at Duke. They're number 1 seed for us. Iowa State continues to impress. It's one of the teams I think doesn't get a lot of publicity. They get enough, but they don't get as much as Auburn and the SEC. But those are our four number one seeds: Auburn, Duke, Tennessee, and Iowa State. And you're right, Tennessee got handed to them at Florida, but that's a good set of teams there. I think there are three other teams, Grant, that possibly could right now be considered for a one seed if we really wanted to argue, and that's Alabama and Marquette and Florida. I think they all have enough wins and quad one wins that you could argue that maybe they move up and Iowa State moves down. But I think 7 teams right now are the top teams in the country. I do like your Illinois. I like Coach Underwood. And they're real close too, but I think those top 7 are number 1 seeds. Illinois is a solid 2 seed. Of Alabama, Marquette, and Florida, which team, if you were to argue to move up, which team would you think would move up in that seed?
I think you'd have to go Marquette. You look at what they're doing in the Big East this year, which is always a tough competitive league. You could still say the same for Alabama and Florida because they're in the SEC, which is, in my opinion, a basketball conference now, no longer a football conference only, but they have basketball in that conference now if people didn't know that. And Florida and Alabama are kind of an integral part of that. You and I saw Alabama play in person at Purdue. We were there. And, going on the road for Alabama, I mean, I think that's kind of that's obviously what's kept them from being a 1 seed. In my opinion, is the loss on the road at Purdue. And that's a game, we say it all the time, will follow them all the way to Selection Sunday. A loss like that will follow them all the way and where they're going to get seated. But I would have to pick Marquette over those other 2 teams in Alabama and Florida just because of, Shaka Smart's great. They have some really good players as well.
Man, you ever get a podcast with Shaka Smart? I'm going to play that on loop. He's one of my favorite all-time coaches.
Oh, yeah.
And I had the chance to see him at Butler last year when they played Butler and be in the press conference, and I was loving life. I liked the things that he did. I know he had a little struggle at Texas, but I think he's found his spot in Marquette, and they're a fun team to watch. So, Grant, going to our 3 seeds, we have Kentucky, Mississippi State, Oregon, and Texas A&M. And our 4 seeds are Michigan, Memphis, Kansas, and we changed UConn today in the middle of our class and dropped Gonzaga. There was a lot of discussion. We focused our discussion today on this 3 and 4 line because, Grant, I think these are tight. These resumes are really, really tight. And, Kentucky has the name, Mississippi State not the recognition for basketball, but they're having a good year. We talk about SEC being a basketball school. I know us Indiana football fans want to argue with some of those commentators about the SEC dominance in football, but we cannot argue about the dominance in basketball. There are 3 teams here on the 3 seed line. They got 2 teams on the 2 seed line and 2 on the 1. That's 7 teams that we have in the top 3 seeds. Of those 8 teams in our 3 and 4 seed, which team do you like and feel really good about at this point?
Right now, I can't believe I'm saying this. I feel really good about Kentucky. Watching that game against Florida the other day, it's a Saturday morning game. The game tipped off at 11 a.m., which is I heard them say on the broadcast it was the earliest start time in the history of Rupp Arena for a Kentucky basketball game. But I really like them. I like what Mark Pope's doing there. The guys, they have these transfers that came in. Lamont Butler, a really good one. These guys that Coach Pope brought with him from BYU, they had a great portal haul. And in my opinion, I think Kentucky I think they're exceeding expectations a little bit. Mark Pope taking that big of a jump from BYU all the way to Kentucky in year 1 has them as a title contender. I think a lot of people thought Kentucky would be a team it would take a year or 2 to get there, and they would kind of, hover around, maybe being on the bubble, maybe being a 7 through 10 seed maybe, but they've at this point, early January, they have exceeded expectations, in my opinion. And that's probably the number 1 team on that line that stands out to me. Oregon's playing Ohio State right now. 2-2. They're 2-2 in Big Ten play, 2-0 on the in road games. I think one of the things that jumps out to you with Kentucky is that They are 0-2 on the road. Mississippi State 3-0 on the road. Texas A&M 1-1 on the road. That's just road games are where your resume gets built. If you can win on the road, no matter what league, that's where your resume is going to get built off of, is if you can win on the road.
Yeah, I don't like it being an Indiana fan saying that I kind of like Coach Pope and what he's doing at Kentucky.
Absolutely.
I think they're going to be a relevant team come March. I think they're a team that is sitting there at the 3 line. We had them at the 2 line. They have a little room to fall, as you mentioned, the road record. And I looked at their metrics, and defensively they struggle a little bit. And against a really good SEC, that could come in and cause some problems because you got to battle each and every night. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Kentucky fall, but that doesn't mean that they're not overachieving. If they get a 4 or 5 seed this year, which I think is very, very likely, I think that's an outstanding result for year one.
Yeah.
You mentioned Texas A&M. I love Coach Buzz Williams. Okay, I'm going to say I love about 8 coaches or 9 coaches because I really like the coaches as well as I like the teams and the players.
I'm right there with you.
Our buddy up at Oakland, he's not having that good a year, but I really liked him at the Horizon, right? He's as good as it gets. But Texas A&M, they went on the road last night and beat Oklahoma, and they were without Wade Taylor, their sharpshooter from outside, and to win on the road against a team that had only had 1 loss at the time. Oklahoma was 13-1 at Oklahoma. Without your leading scorer, that says something. I think Coach Williams does a really good job of motivating his team, and he does a great job of offensive rebounding. When they played Purdue down in Indianapolis, and you watch, and they run to the triangle. So they run someone to each kind of short corner, and they run someone to the middle of the lane where they can kind of attack any miss, and they do a good job of rebounding. And then you got a team that's not ranked well in the net, that lovely mathematical formula that is used by the NCAA committee in Memphis at 32. But, boy, they have a lot of quad wins. They have 10 quad 1 and 2 wins and a 6 overall schedule strength, 7 non-conference strength. I think that's going to be rewarded. I think you'll see Memphis run the table in their conference.
Have you seen their non-conference schedule?
Seed. Yeah, it's crazy.
There's no other team in the country that's scheduled, I think, a tougher non-conference schedule. There was no game when that non-conference schedule came out. I remember thinking there is no game on there that is a cakewalk game for Memphis.
Yeah. And then they lose at home to Arkansas State, which is the only blemish on their record. But
the thing is, Arkansas State could make the tournament very well.
So as you look at our spreadsheet and you get involved now in looking at our stuff, and you've been watching basketball forever, what questions do you have for me about teams and seeding or how we go about doing? Ask me a couple questions.
I just it's impressive. Like, I'm not so sure it's really a question as much as it's a statement, I guess. But it seems like, because when it gets into the nitty gritty time in February, I'll sit here at home every night and I'll look at every single possible bracketology thing. I've looked at Delphi. I've looked at these other guys. I mean, seriously, look at these other bracketologists that do it and how everybody really has the same thing. Like Joe Lunardi, it may not be like 100% close to what you guys have done, but it's in the ballpark. And it's just impressive then when the bracket really does come out of how close it is. I just don't get the math behind it, I guess. I'm a great math student. Any math teacher that's ever had me would tell you that. But
well, we'll teach you all the ins and outs of how we had a great question today from a student that said, how can we have Houston ahead of a team like Michigan State when Houston has 0 quad 1 wins,
right?
But Michigan State has 2. But the best thing I could tell them is it's like a bowl of soup. There's so many pieces of data that you throw in to the mix that you got to look. And we have a a criteria list up on the board. Quad 1 wins. Then we look at quad 2. We look at the net. Then we look at quad 1 and 2. Then we look at strength of schedule. Then we look at the quality of the opponents. Road record. So we have it all listed there. And it's really interesting when you get 8 or 9 data points to see how that team, can be ranked where they're at. And then you combine that, Grant, to this net and the trends. Like a team in single digits usually only falls 3 or 4 seed lines if they don't have the resume, the big wins, right? So with Houston being a 4, they're not a 1 seed. At 4, they should be, but we have them as a 5 seed. I can't drop them anymore, even though their resume, their wins, says maybe to drop them. That's kind of the fun part of it too. And on Bracket Sunday, it's kind of the frustration when you really put some good thinking into it, but it just went a different way. So as we look now, let's talk a little bit about what teams we see likely to drop, whether that's, I mentioned one already in Kentucky that's likely to drop maybe to the 4 or 5 seed line. And so it can be someone who's high in the rankings or someone low in the rankings who's dropped. And what teams do you think might jump up? They've had a little bit of a rocky start, but boy, they're starting to play well. Do you eyeball some of those on our spreadsheet?
There's some that I can think of off the top of my head that for a lot of bracketologies may not be in the field quite yet, like Villanova doing what they did last week against Butler, where I was at the game and Butler blows a double-digit lead down the stretch. They win that. They beat Connecticut last night. Alex Caravan missed 2 big free throws for them, but Villanova, I think, is a team that with another win, I think could climb into the bracket. UCLA, a team that I think could, you haven't brought it up yet, but I think could drop, with how they're playing, lost to Michigan the other night. There's so many here. I think Ole Miss is a team. Mississippi is a team that can jump. Purdue, even a team that I would not be surprised seeing as a 3 or 4 seed in a lot of projected brackets.
I think, Grant, what we're going to see is when the SEC and the Big Ten start beating up on each other, which team takes multiple losses in a row. You mentioned UCLA. I think they lost at Nebraska. They've lost to Michigan at home. You want to avoid 2-3 game losing streaks in these power conferences because that can really drop you, because other teams from your own conference and other conferences are getting quad 1 wins or quad 2 wins and jumping up ahead of you. I think those were some good teams to watch. Interesting team to watch is Louisville. Can they maintain winning? They're in a conference that's not as strong, though. There's not as many opportunities for wins. But they have moved into our bracket recently. I would keep an eye on them if they can maintain that. And then you got some teams that, like North Carolina and Clemson, they have Arizona. They have no blemishes, no bad losses, but they don't have a lot of good wins. Where do you put those teams who were thought to be maybe top 10, 15 teams in the beginning of the season? So, always we'll start our television show. We'll do our Wednesday 6:30 shows starting next week, and we'll always talk about who's rising and who's falling to give everyone a list. And to explain just a little bit to our listeners, if they're tuning in for the first time or just a refresher, we compare all teams across all conferences. So it's not, Indiana versus Iowa, and then we move someone up. You've got to compare them to everyone. So when we have our seed list, we look at all the 8 seeds and 9 seeds and do some comparison there.
And like, think about it. Like, think about the teams out of 1-bid leagues. Like, speaking hypothetically right now, a team like UC Irvine, if they were undefeated on January 9th, I mean, you'd have to consider them in the field as probably a higher seed than what they're already. I'm just using that as an example, right? So so you kind of have to look at, I wouldn't say every possible outcome, but you have to look at like every possible, kind of scenarios, those kind of things.
Yeah, and those automatic qualifiers from the smaller conferences, seeds 12 through 13 are really interesting. Well, you're listening to the Bracket U from Delphi Bracketology. I'm Brian Tonsoni, the director, leader, teacher, whatever you want to call me, coach of the bracket group. Joining me tonight is Grant Shouse, and he mentions those 1-bid conferences, and that's right up Grant's alley because Grant loves the small college basketball, and he's an expert in those mid-majors. So, Grant, when you look at the mid-majors, and you're good at evaluating that and watching those games. I know you turn off NFL football sometimes to watch, the 32nd conference strength conference teams playing. It's really why I wanted you to be a part of us, because you bring that expertise. But everyone loves the 12-5 upset, and generally those 12 seeds are the best mid-majors.
Yeah.
Who are we looking at right now for those 12-5 or 13-4 upsets? Are there some teams that people can start putting on their list to advance in an upset? What do you think?
Obviously, when the bracket comes out and everybody fills it out, the 12-5 upset's kind of like it's the trendy one, So, you mentioned teams that on that 12 line, UC Irvine was the first one that stood out to me because they're probably one of the best mid-major teams in the country. They're 13-2, 3-0 at home, 6-2 on the road. But the biggest one that stands out for me is that they are 3-0 on a neutral court. And I mean, think about it. When you play in the NCAA tournament, every game's on a neutral floor. So they're 3-0 on a neutral floor. They're 0-1 against quad one teams. 2 quality wins they've had. They beat Kent State out of the MAC, which is a bigger conference than what UC Irvine is in the Big West. The MAC is a little bit of a bigger, better conference. That's a quality win they had. Another one, they beat Belmont on December 19th, 92-84. They have 4 guys averaging double figures for them. They have a big one tonight against Cal State Northridge. But UC Irvine's probably that first team that stands out to me. Of course, McNeese State. One of them, Will Wade, who's been around. He's been a coach. They were in the tournament last year. How you feel about him is it is what it is. But he's always had McNeese State playing really good basketball. That's another one.
The dude can coach.
He can.
I'll come right back to you. Sorry to interrupt.
No, good.
But
you're good.
Everyone picked McNeese as an upset last year because they had a great year, and they even played well against the quad one teams. And boy, then they got blown out in that first round. So sometimes these 12-5 or 13-4 don't work out.
Well, and that's why the NCAA tournament's so great, because the team you thought was going to be the Cinderella and was going to be the upset does really never turns out to be that way. Last year, I remember thinking, and you were there at the Horizon League and saw, we saw Oakland. And I remember thinking about it after that. Like, I kept telling everyone when the bracket came out, I was like, dude, don't sleep on this Oakland team. And that's like the first time I've ever been right. So I took a lot of pride in that, but go ahead.
No, I was going to say, we have a couple people joining us on and off. If you have a question, put it in the comments.
Yeah.
We'd be more than happy to answer any questions. But I love the NCAA tournament. We'll talk a little bit later about possibly expanding it. But right now, let's go through some conferences and talk about a team that we either like or that we don't like from a bracket perspective, or just how well they're playing, however you want to take it. So let's talk Big Ten, Grant. What team are you looking at right now?
Right now, this week I'm looking at Michigan. Quality win against UCLA. They've lost a couple games they probably shouldn't have lost, but Michigan's a team that is night and day from a year ago under Juwan Howard. And I like Juwan Howard, but just Dusty May and the direction he's taking them, the transfers they have, I wouldn't be surprised seeing them as a 7 through 10 seed in the NCAA tournament, maybe even higher, maybe sneak in as a 6 seed if they can make a run in their conference tournament. So Michigan's probably that team I'm looking at right now.
That Wolf kid really can play some basketball. He's a fun watch. For me, you mentioned it earlier as a team that you really liked on our 2 seed line. I'm fascinated with Illinois. I catch a lot of grief from some of our Assembly Call fans for being too friendly with Illinois, but I really like the way they're playing right now. I think that's a team to beat. They're beating people by double digits and 20 points. I mean, they handled Penn State. I know that was at home, but in a competitive league, you rarely see blowouts like that. And Illinois is just playing well. Last night they played without their Casper, I'll mess it up. Jakasunas or whatever his the freshman point guard can really, really play. I know I butchered that. But Illinois, for me, is a team in the Big Ten that I think you need to watch if you're interested in the bracket of where they end up. Let's move to the Big 12, Grant. You have a team right now that has been in and out of our bracket, and a kind of tough to tell whether they're in at the moment. So talk a little bit about Arizona State.
Yeah, they're just right here on our seed list. They're like the one of the first 4 teams out. It looks like they're 10-4, 1-1 in the Big 12. They're 1-4 in quad 1 games. The rest, and I think that's probably what's leaving them out right now, is that they are 1-4 against those quad 1 teams. But they're a team I could see maybe sneaking in. They snuck into the tournament a few years ago with Bobby Hurley. Played in the first 4 against Steve Alford in Nevada, but. Arizona State's probably that team in the Big 12 right now. They're, obviously very well coached. They are they're ranked 32nd in strength of schedule, and playing a tough schedule like that can always prepare you for the NCAA tournament.
They scheduled well in the non-conference. I've had them in and out, and I can't remember now why we dropped them out. But they have no blemishes either, so they have no losses in quad 3 or 4 in the non-conference. So they got some wins in the Big 12 to try to accumulate and move up. But I wouldn't be surprised to see them make a run for the tournament. For me, the surprise team is West Virginia. Coach DeVries moves from Drake and brings his son, and they've won games without his son on the road at Kansas. Very, very surprised. I was a little shocked they lost at home to Arizona. And we're not talking about Arizona, but Arizona had a heck of a week going to Cincinnati and to West Virginia and picking up 2 quad 1 wins to really get them back in the bracket. But West Virginia is a team, and Grant, this is a team that could either go up or down, right? No one expected them to be very competitive this year, and they've shocked some people with their performances in the Bahamas and then the win at Kansas. So everyone listening, keep an eye on West Virginia. Moving to that basketball power conference now, not a football conference. And I'm sorry, we got some really good Alabama and Auburn fans who follow us. So if they're tuning in or tune in at some point to our podcast, we love you. You do a really good job of following us and supporting us. But they're a basketball conference now because it's just loaded. Coach Beard, you like him?
I do. I do. He's a guy that if the Indiana job ever came open, maybe they'd want to think about going after him. But, he took Texas Tech to the national championship 2019. He did an amazing job at Texas until, how he got dismissed at Texas happened. Takes over at Ole Miss this year. They're 13-2. They won, they're 8-0 at home, 3-1 on a neutral floor. Sean Padula leads them 14 points a game. He's their leading scorer. Jalen Murray, 12 points a game. Matthew Morrell, 12 points as well. Dre Davis, 11 points. You get, if you're a college basketball team, you can get 4 or 5 guys scoring in double figures, averaging in double figures every night. You're poised to be a good team. And so I think Ole Miss is one of those teams, and we said it earlier, they can jump. I think they can fall just because they're in such a competitive league. Had that big win over Arkansas the other night that I think's going to help their seeding.
I wrote down on our run sheet Texas A&M, and I've already talked about him. Coach Williams is an excellent coach. Wade Taylor can shoot it up, but they have other players that can get it done. I think Texas A&M is going to make a run towards those top teams, Auburn and Alabama. Who is the guy? His name's escaping me. He went for over 30 in Wade Taylor's. I can't think of it. They had someone who stepped up in Wade Taylor's absence.
I didn't get a chance to watch it. But
yeah, I didn't see the box score either. But one of our students today was nominated this guy for player of the week. I think he scored 32 points, and the name is escaping me right now. But Texas A&M, if you can win without your best player on the road in a tough conference, please watch the Aggies. Let's move to the Big East. They've struggled in the non-conference. We both mentioned both of our teams earlier, but let's add just a little bit more. Go ahead with your Big East team.
Yeah, Villanova. Like we said, the huge win over, um, UConn. I mean, to beat the back-to-back national champions is, and in a team that is completely night and day from where they were in the Maui Invitational back in November that's a huge win. And I get it. It was at home. It was, it wasn't on the road. It wasn't in stores, but Villanova team with Eric Dixon, the country's leading scorer, went off in the game against Butler I was at. They just have some really good pieces. I think they're gelling together well as a team. I think they're meshing well right now. Things are looking up for Villanova. But one of the things I'd be remiss to mention here is Dan Hurley last night after the game dropped maybe one of the best quotes I've ever heard. Talk about Alex Caravan. Missed those 2 free throws, and you may have seen this, but for the people who haven't, he said, I told Alex after the game, he goes, when we get back to storage, you get off the bus, and if you're feeling sad, you just go home and take out that box with your 2 national championship rings in them, play with them a little bit, and get ready for Georgetown. So,
yeah, that's good coaching, because that's tough when a player does that, and you're going to need that young man in order to make a run for the 3rd championship. I've talked already about Marquette, but let's talk a little bit about their squad. Cam Jones, I think, is just a fantastic point guard, and he directs everything. And I think when they start driving and sharing the basketball, they're very good. They've struggled. They've won 2 games, but they struggled here the last couple games. I thought the ball got stuck a little bit, but Cam Jones and what I like about Marquette is that they are old school. They're not into the portal as much, and I know we've all accepted that the portal and NIL is all big and all that, and I'm not here to disagree with that, but you do like seeing teams like Purdue and Michigan State and Marquette have some success doing it the old way, getting freshmen in, developing freshmen, keeping players for multiple years. The other guy that I really like is Stevie Mitchell. I mean, he's just a do-everything type of player for Marquette. I think it's just a fun brand of basketball. Now, they have not played well in the postseason under Shaka Smart. That's one of the criticisms of the guy that I think is one of the best coaches in the country, and so I'm looking forward to seeing him be successful in the tournament. And our last major conference is the ACC, and they've been on the struggle bus, only having 5 teams selected in the last few years, and I think they're going to be even less maybe this year. But you have an interesting team that's with the first-year coach, the Louisville Cardinals.
I do like Louisville, and especially when you think about what they did to Indiana and beating them the way they did by like 40. But they played some games against teams that they quite frankly probably should have lost to. These smaller school teams like UTEP. They only beat 77-74, and this is a UTEP team that you guys Delphi Bracketology as of right now has them in the field. So not a terrible loss. Obviously, you want to beat those kind of teams, pretty bad because you should, because you're the bigger school. But Chucky Hepburn for them, 15 points a game. Terrence Edwards Jr. And sorry, I see, I know who I'm talking about in these, but I have to pull names up because it escapes me.
I have to do the same thing. You're fine.
Terrence Edwards Jr., 13 points a game. Got another guy at 13 points a game, and Ryan Smith. From top to bottom, again, it's another good coaching turnaround job. Kind of like you talked about West Virginia a little bit. The same for Louisville. Like you get guys like Chucky Hepburn who's played in the Big Ten, played against tough Big Ten teams and good atmosphere, and having that guy kind of be your point guard, your leader on the floor, it shows a lot of poise going forward when you got to go on the road and you got to play at Duke, or you got to play at North Carolina, you got to play at Clemson, another good one. You got to play at Pitt. Those kind of games, those kind of wins can, like we said, they'll follow you all the way to Selection Sunday, no matter the outcome. But a team we don't have on there in North Carolina, I think as of right now, I know they beat Notre Dame the other day, and I know we'll talk about Notre Dame in a second, but I think they're a team that could unfortunately play themselves out of the tournament right now. in North Carolina.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of opportunities for quad one wins in the ACC, and so they're got to take care of business. Maybe beat Duke to move up, and if they lose some games, you start getting some tough losses in there.
Yeah.
Then that can be a negative effect on the North Carolina. I'm a big Notre Dame fan. I love Coach Shrewsbury. They're on the struggle bus. They have lost 2 games right down to the buzzer. They lost last night to North Carolina State. At the end, the guy hits a 3. They were up 2, a 4-point play, and 1 on a 3. I was at the Notre Dame North Carolina game. They went 8 games without Marcus Burton, their point guard, and that's when they went out to the Las Vegas and lost to Rutgers and lost to Houston. So they're 1 game under 500. We're talking on a bracket show about a team that's probably not going to make it unless they make a run in the tournament. But what I think is fun is I think Notre Dame is going to be back on a night when they're getting ready here in 40 minutes to play for a right to go to the championship game in football. I think the basketball program is under good direction, and we won't probably talk about them a whole lot anymore this year, but they can really do some things, and they got Harrelson, the young kid Harrelson coming in, the stud from La Lumiere. That was a big recruiting
got a
win.
kid
So
coming in from got a kid coming in from Indianapolis Cathedral too, and Brady Kaler, a 6'7" stretch guy, kind of like Harrelson, but I think the future is bright for Notre Dame. I'm going to see them February 16th, actually against Louisville on a Sunday night. I'll be up there for that one. Still waiting to hear back if I'll be there Monday against Boston College, though. But
that is a night game.
Yes, the Louisville game. It says on the schedule it's a night game.
That is good news, breaking good news, because I thought it was a noon game, and I now have my granddaughter's baptism on that day in Mishawaka. So I might be able to stay and cover the game at the same time. So that's good news. But those are the 5. Those are the major conferences. We lost the Pac-12, and everyone should be aware of that. But those are the 5 major conferences. There's some good conferences out there, and I believe should get multiple bids. I don't think all the bids should come from the 5 conferences that Grant and I just talked about. So, Grant, as you're looking at this, what other conferences do you like that you think might be able to snag one of those at-large bids and have 2 or 3 teams from those conferences make the NCAA tournament?
I love the Mountain West. It's fun to turn those games on like late night at like 11 o'clock. They're just tipping off, and you see a team like San Diego State playing Boise State. You know what I mean? And those teams, like I think we only have maybe like 2 or 3 Mountain West teams right now in our tournament. But that's unfortunate. But I think they're going to get better. I think the conference is going to get better. You're going to see teams start to get better. I'm disappointed in Nevada, man. Like being an Indiana fan, always followed Steve Alford. My dad's a big Steve Alford fan, so we always try to keep up with Nevada. They're struggling right now, but you look at the good teams they got in that conference: New Mexico, San Diego State, Utah State, which are 3 teams that I believe we have in the field right now, with New Mexico being one of the last 4 in.
Yeah, New Mexico's interesting. Their net's not very good, but they have a win over UCLA. That conference was not looked upon very highly by the committee last year. They got a lot lower seeds than most bracketologists had. And so, but that is a good conference. On my smart TV, I got the Mountain West Network. So when
good, so do I.
You can just go and grab that. You and I are a lot alike. I'm a lot older and not as smart about basketball. You're a lot smarter about basketball and a lot younger, but we are 2 of the same. For me, it's the A-10. I think there's good basketball in the A-10, and St. Bonaventure gets beat the other day. Dayton gets upset twice this week on the road and got beat pretty bad.
There's something about the A-10 I want to add there. For a while, it looked like Archie Miller and company there at Rhode Island were on an absolute roll, but have kind of fallen apart since then. But no, like you said, the A-10's great. Like, and this goes for all conferences, but on any given night, a team like Dayton, like who's probably the premier team in the league, probably stands at them. And this season, them and St. Bonaventure have been probably the 2 top teams. Like Dayton's lost 2 in a row. Like they lost the game on the road at George Washington. They lose last night against UMass and Frank Martin.
And they have some nice wins. I mean, they beat Marquette at Dayton, and they won some games out, I think, in Maui, right?
Yeah,
that's what's keeping them at a 10 seed right now. But they're in the 60s in the net, and last year I don't think any team over 50 got in the net. I may be wrong. There may have been one team in the 60, and the highest ever is 76. But Dayton's got to stop losing some of those games here. They're in a bad stretch. I wonder if there's an injury or something that possibility. But I'm a big VCU fan too.
Mm-hmm.
I think they've had a run of coaches that have gone on to take over. Rhodes left there and went to Penn State and is doing some good things at Penn State. And we have a lot of supporters of our bracketology club that are VCU fans. In fact, I did a podcast right before Christmas with a VCU fan. And again, if anyone's listening to this and would like to share their fandom of their college, I'd be more than happy to interview you and put you out on a podcast. It's my way of getting to know people. We've done Alabama, Iowa, and now VCU. So I would like to continue to do podcasts along those lines. So you're listening to The Bracket U, brought to you by Delphi Bracketology. I'm the coach, Brian Tonsoni, and joining me tonight has been Grant Shouse, and it's been a fun evening of basketball talk. You will see Grant on our webpage. You'll see Grant on these podcasts every once in a while when he's not out covering high school and college sports. But it's a time now for our last call, and the topic for us now is expansion of the NCAA tournament. It's gaining steam to expand. Yes or no, and if we have to, I'm a no real quick, but if we have to expand, what number would you be okay with, Grant? Your thoughts on the tournament expanding?
If it were to expand, I think they need to go to – I think you only go to 72. But here's my thing. It is like you said. For me, it's an immediate no. Like don't mess with the NCAA tournament. It's the best postseason in sports. I tell my buddies that all the time, and believe it or not, they don't argue. So maybe I'm right, but it's best postseason in sports. I don't think you want to touch it, but if you were to expand it to 72 teams, I don't think you add more. I don't think you add more like I don't want to say automatic qualifiers, but I think the only way to do it is to get those bubble teams that are just on the outside looking in, like the last four, like those last four teams, like 69 through 72, 69, 70, 71, 72, they get in the tournament. And what you do is that's all played at UD Arena. That's the first four right there. You know, you just kind of honestly, all you do is just expand the first four, and these teams on the bubble play each other just like they do in the first four. I think that's how in my opinion, I think that's the only way you can do it if you were to expand it, but I don't think it should be touched at all. Should not be tampered.
I'm with you. I don't want to see it expand. If it is going to expand and you can guarantee some mid-majors making it, like in Indiana State last year, and making sure they get a spot, right? They should have been in anyway. Then I could see that. You know, we're talking about VCU, and you're talking about, you know, Nevada, and if they get going and winning, you know, not cutting off some of those, the A-10, the Missouri Valley should, you know, if Drake and Bradley both deserve to have a shot, I think. And so if you have to go to 72 or 76, and Grant, I'll tell you, I think somewhere on our webpage we did a 76-team bracket based on the NCAA committee's seeding list, and then we added some of those teams, like you said, at the very end. And what we did is you played a lot of 12-seed play-ins with the at-large additions, and you combined the 16 and the 15 seeds, which I'm not really a big fan of. But we suggested you play at the Palestra, at Dayton, and at Hinkle. So
I love that idea. I love that.
Right? Some of the best venues in basketball. If you're going to expand and have the first four, like you said, see if you can't get those historic venues.
Right.
Because then if you're a 15 or 16 seed, you're in the tournament, I know you're in on a Tuesday, but you're going and playing in a place that you will forever remember as some of the meccas of
Let
basketball.
me ask you a question real quick.
Sure.
Have you ever been to a game at UD Arena?
Yes, I've been to a high school game, high school basketball. My buddy Mike Noska, who used to coach at Wabash, probably, and I coached at Northfield. That was probably way before you were even you were probably paying attention at the age of 3 or 4, but we were coaching over in your area, and then he took a job outside of Cincinnati and got really good, and their sectional and regional games were in UD Arena. So, it's a great place. I want to go see you went last year to that first four.
I plan on going this year, but last year is amazing. Like the vibe around it's awesome. My dad, who's standing here in the kitchen with me, he's from Dayton, and so he actually and he's standing right here smiling at me. But he actually graduated high school in UD Arena, graduated in that building. So it's cool. It's a great place to watch a game. But I've always said that too. Like if you're going to expand the tournament, you get these other bubble teams that are kind of a play-in team. I think you have one site at Dayton and the other at Hinkle Fieldhouse. Hinkle Fieldhouse can do it, and they would do it well. Like they hosted the NIT last year. They hosted this year the Final Four, the NIT. And I think they have it. Actually, I know for a fact they have it next year too. So the NIT, I think, could have found its permanent home at Hinkle Fieldhouse, just like the first four has its permanent home there in Dayton. It should never leave Dayton. I would be very upset if it did, but just playing in these historical venues and going to them as a fan is just it's an out of body experience is the only way I can describe it.
Absolutely, I might have to join you for the first four sometime.
Yeah.
And make sure you say hello to Dad. You know, Dad being a good basketball coach, and he raised a good son there. So make sure he knows that I want to say hello and Happy New Year to your old man.
I don't know where he went. There he is right now. Yeah, Tonsoni said hey. He said hey. All right.
So, Grant, share with everyone where they can find some of your work.
Yeah, you can go online. I actually ordered business cards the other day, but you can go online, shousehoops.com. I try to keep up with it. It's tough balancing doing games on the radio and then trying to find a high school, college game when I'm not busy or, when I'm allowed to. So, it's great. Just, again, your search engine, Google, Yahoo, whatever you use, shousehoops.com. You read a lot about Indiana high school basketball and some college basketball in there too.
Well, this is going to do it for this episode of the Bracket U. We all really enjoyed our conversation tonight with Grant, and we thank you for joining us this evening. But we'll be back soon with another edition of the Bracket U podcast where we talk brackets. Our weekly podcast will be Wednesdays at 6:30. At least that's the schedule now, all the way up and through and after Selection Sunday. And check out our website, DelphiBracketology.com. Follow us on Twitter at Delphi Brackets, Instagram at Delphi Bracketology for updates and information. And our new media organization of our 25 students wants to get a TikTok. I'm too old for TikTok, but we're going to try to get information out all the time. You can email us or get a hold of us on Twitter. We would love to answer questions about your team. So we encourage you to check out our donation page where you can help us with all internet costs, the pizza parties at the back end, and gear for our students. We would appreciate that. So for Grant Shouse, I'm Brian Tonsoni. Until next time, happy hoop watching.